I haven't done this in a while. Used to do 3 shows a day. And the difference now is I have to figure out which glasses are going to work, and I actually need glasses to do this. I hear ya. So this was an interesting thing to do at this time of year, I found, because it seems to be already a time of reflection. So I was enjoying it, looking back, and thank you for the opportunity. So I suppose at this point I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about who I am, which we were chuckling on the drive over and saying, well, that's not going to take too long. Very entertaining, but I suppose I could start with where I was born, in the heart of the Great Lakes, Sault Ste. Marie, to Shirley and Charlie Carpenter. We're a family of 5. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and I guess you'd call us a traditional Canadian family, as my mom was a homemaker. My dad supported us with his work as a printer. He started sweeping the floors at the age of 16, worked hard to become a pressman, transitioned to management, and then ownership, finally sold the business and continued to act as management until his retirement just over 50 years later. At the same place. If this sounds like the best example of dedication and perseverance you've heard in a while, I can tell you that my mom's life's work as she managed our family and our solid home was just as impressive, oftentimes more so. My parents are still the finest example of hard work and determination and loyalty I've ever known. And they were teenage sweethearts, both from broken homes and extreme poverty, who waited until they turned 21 so they would not need their parents' written consent to marry. I believe I first acquired my admiration for independent spirits from them, my heroes. I had the best childhood in our happy home. I ventured off to the big city to attend the University of Toronto. There I earned an honors degree in English and history and environmental science. I chose to attend the University of Windsor later so I could acquire my outdoor education qualifications while I earned my Bachelor of Education. It was always my hope to teach in a field center. I enjoyed the new setting in Windsor, the southernmost region of Canada, as everybody knows. And I recall turning on the air conditioning in late November. Seems like the opposite end of the earth from Dryden. Northern Ontario beckoned again. In those days it was impossible to get a teaching job. Kind of goes around, comes around. I applied for a library tech position in Manitowocc. Any of you know where Manitowocc is? Lynn doesn't. She's behaving because she's still eating. The principal discouraged me from pursuing that position. Instead, she suggested that I live in the teacherage and supply teach, try and support myself. She said I could possibly do that. I did. I was able to. And she would try to offer me a job the following September. She kept her word. And so I had a job teaching grades 7 and 8 in September. By chance, she also introduced me to a forester in town who happened to be working for her husband at the M&R. For some reason, still unknown to me, Matthew Benson was very interested in spending more time with me. And the next couple of years saw him continue his training in the thriving metropolis of Ignace. So we had a long-distance commuting relationship for a while. He rode the Greyhound bus and got off at the Manitowocc Corners, if you know where that is, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Jeannie knows where that is. It's a long time ago, Jeannie. Yes, Jeannie and Jack were there at the time. He got a permanent job with the M&R in Dryden after he finished his training in Ignace, and so he asked me to marry him, and he showed me, by turning over the road map, as you all know, where Dryden was, because I said, well, it's, I was confused. And as he explained and showed and turned over the road map, I burst into tears. It's true. He was a little concerned. On our first drive to scout out Dryden on that May long weekend, I got a glimpse of Thunder Lake as we approached the town. I was so taken I can recall declaring that I believe I'd like to live on that lake. Next year we'll have lived on the lake for 30 years. I might add that we came here for 2 years. When we got to Dryden, we moved comfortably into the Green Acres Trailer Park. Quite happy there, and I jumped into the supply teaching circuit. It was a great apprenticeship. I saw all aspects of the system, learned how many worked. Partway through that first year that we had arrived, a half-time position at Oxdrift Public School was advertised. I was told by those around me that I should apply just for the experience, but not to get excited. There'd be no way in hell, to quote, that I would get the job. It was already earmarked for the husband of a staff member at the high school. I got the interview and somehow convinced Bill Salonen and Cheryl Hoshizaki, who were on the panel, to hire me. That got me in the door with the board. I had a great first year with some pretty special people there at Oxdrift. And I learned that once you're a part of the Oxdrift community, you're always a part of the Oxdrift community. The families of the children I taught that year still treat me as though I'm one of theirs, all these years later. But in spite of the warm welcome and acceptance, I was declared redundant right away in March and was once again without a job. So before the summer, the high school advertised the position and I applied. This time the legendary Brian Kenny sat on the interview. It was the most unusual experience. Looking back, I probably should have run when I had the chance. Partway through the interview, we were interrupted with a phone call that Rick Victor surprisingly picked up. Suddenly there was a lot of confusion, many questions, as Rick tried to determine if a student had crawled out the second floor window and lowered himself to the front lawn earlier that afternoon. Right, crawling in that place too. I don't know for how many of you remember the front of the school. That would have been right outside Rick's office. It didn't take long to confirm that yes, in fact, somebody had been able to swing out of the window and land on the front lawn. In spite of the foreshadowing, I started at the high school in September. I enjoyed a very rewarding career as a classroom teacher until June of 2015. Over the years, I was able to coach basketball, starting with the senior boys that very first year. It was a team that nobody wanted. It was a great introduction as we were inspired by the lack of expectations, and we pushed to a league and regional championship that first year. Most importantly, I caught the bug. I coached for the better part of my career quite happily. It allowed me to interact with a large group of students I may not have met in my classes. Over the years, I had the privilege of standing before thousands of students, many of your children actually. The classroom was the heart of the game for me. As with most professions, the longer you're there, the more likely the opportunity will present itself to move into another area of management or administration. I chose not to go in that direction entirely, but was able to contribute to the positive progress made at school as a department head. We had a great group of department heads for a time over there. I'm proud of the work that we did together. I always felt privileged to be able to stay in the classroom, and I was grateful for that. The thrill for me was the little rush I got when the light bulb of understanding went off for a student. It was what drew me into the profession in the beginning, and I'm most grateful to say that I got that little rush on the very last day in June of 2015. Matthew, my husband, is a forester, as I mentioned, and some of you already know that too, obviously. Not long after we arrived, his position here became redundant. Actually, not quite a year after. It was one of the very frequent M&R reorganizations. He was successful in getting a new position in Sioux Lookout as their forest supervisor. We could have very easily then relocated to Sioux Lookout, and this story of mine today would have been a very different one. We chose to live on Thunder Lake, and Matt commuted. Eventually he did return as the Dryden area manager. It was meant to be. Dryden has been the best place to raise a family. On a cold morning in December, our older daughter, Alana, was born. I'm sure many of you in the room have known that feeling. When I held her that morning for the first time in my life, clearly knew my purpose. Raising a child in the tiny town of Dryden is like winning the lottery. We were still luckier a few years later when our daughter Sarah was born, and the world has never been the same. We are so grateful for the family life we've been able to enjoy here. It's a pretty special place on the planet, as you all know. I often tell a little story about an idyllic perspective that my daughters have. And once when we were visiting the home of Matt's brother in suburbia near Toronto, Alana became quite confused. She was about 4 years old, and after a happy hour or so playing with her cousins, she was ready to go outside. She suddenly stopped, looked about, and in her best stage whisper across the room said, "Mommy, where is their lake?" Matt and I have tried to raise two strong-minded, kind women. I'm proud to say our daughters have grown up to be adults that I like. They're bright, active, creative, and most importantly, kind. They also happen to be two of the funniest people I know. And I know a lot of funny people. The only thing that matters is they are happy and healthy, but those of you with kids who are young adults right now know that there is much to continue to worry about as they find their way. As far as they will as far as hoping they will be good people, though, our work here is done. We've enjoyed a good life here. We are far away from family, but in Dryden we've made such wonderful lifelong friends that we've always felt that we are home. Our kids have always simply considered our friends as extended family, and if you ask them how and why, they would not understand the question. We're forever grateful for our friends. And now as I retired, I turn my attention giving as much as I can to this community that has given so much to my family. Sadly, one of the hazards of my profession is that I know only too well where there's great need in our community. So why Rotary? Well, I did think about it. Marty approached me in Walmart a few minutes after I retired in 2015. I was flattered to be asked, but the words of a very wise woman, Wendy Wiedenhoff, rang in my ears. She had taken me aside when I retired and quietly advised that I should be very, very careful not to make too many commitments of my time until I had been retired for at least a year. I am not so smart, but I'm smart enough to heed all advice that Wendy gives me. So I told Marty I liked the idea, but I would like to wait for a bit. Marty was patient and persistent, and here I am. I'm grateful to be part of Rotary. For me, it provides a highly structured vehicle to make the most of volunteering efforts. I'm most interested in the local focus. I do appreciate the bigger connections to the regions and the rest of the world. It is well respected on a global level, obviously, and apparently it is also an organization that can learn from its mistakes, that has corrected the error of excluding women, and realized that after all we might be able to help the cause. I've always been aware of the greater good Rotary serves. As a little girl in the Sioux, I was intrigued by how they seemed to be everywhere, helping at all the community events. Of special interest to me was their long-standing sponsorship of the biggest annual parade in the Sioux, Community Day Parade. And some of you may have noticed that recently I fell into a new role as Mrs. Claus in the Santa Parade because I absolutely love a parade. So I'm thinking this is all a happy connection for me. From the moment I arrived at Rotary, first meeting, I was made to feel so welcome. The simple act of always having a member at the door to greet everybody is brilliant. I came from a staff at DHS of very dedicated people with a very strong work ethic. It was an honor to call them my colleagues. I recognize those familiar characteristics in this group, and I feel a sense of fellowship. For many years, on the wall of my classroom was posted a quote of Margaret Mead. You may recognize it. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I lived by that philosophy. I was privileged to be in the company of others who lived it with me at DHS, and I hope to keep trying with you. Thank you.